Tucker, it's happened. Splatoon 3 has released. We've played a lot of it, but particularly we've both really doved into the campaign, and we're here to talk about that today. But before we do, if you want to talk to us about Splatoon, or even play it with us, be sure to join our Discord link as usual, top of the description right down there. Like the video, ring the bell, subscribe to the channel. But enough of that. We're here to talk about Splatoon 3's campaign.
Yeah.
And I want to throw it over to you right away, Tucker. High-level thoughts. What do you think about this little adventure?
High level thoughts have to come with a little bit of Tucker Hazel history, patent pending. I
Okay.
have played the campaigns of both Splatoon 2, the base game, and the Octo expansion, which I played
Sure.
very late when it came to allow NSO members to have it for free, because I wasn't going to goddamn pay for that. And I enjoyed the Splatoon 2 campaign, but I
Yeah.
have never thought about it since.
Sure.
And I was very actually mixed on the Octo expansion because the way it was structured and the difficulty spikes really ended up grating on me. But I
Sure.
think that the Splatoon 3 campaign is actually the best campaign that this team has designed so far. I think it's got the best story. I think it's got the best progression. It's got the best mechanics in combining the internal stages with these little overworlds. I think everything it does is the best that the Splatoon team has done, frankly.
Yeah, I think it's really good. So I have played every Splatoon campaign, so 1, 2, and Octo expansion. And I I think that I want more from this team. I think they can do something bigger
Yeah.
and better. Um, but setting that aside, what's here is the best iteration upon this structure of a little overworld to explore, same deep
Hmm.
sea scrolls to find, challenges that are sort of removed from any sort of environmental
Yeah.
context or progression. Insofar as what Splatoon's campaigns have always offered, this is the best version of it.
Absolutely.
I think they can do. I think they can do more.
No,
Does that?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I had a lot of fun,
My
but
my problem with
yeah,
Splatoon campaigns is that I've always felt like they have the Super Mario Sunshine problem of just shit floating in a void. And for me that's not particularly appealing. I understand that it can be okay for a level design and just having it just be a challenge and things are floating and it doesn't really matter as
yeah,
long as the gameplay is moving you forward. But for me, I always prefer a sense of place, and I think that Splatoon has such an interesting and rich world that having more coherent environments would really go a long way in making the campaign feel like you were making progress through actual areas. You were completing things that aren't just in a kettle, then you go to
yeah.
another completely random world, and it's very disconnected. And so that is my major complaint with this.
Right.
But I don't levy this complaint against the Splatoon 3 campaign completely because, again, as you said, this is just what Splatoon campaigns are. And I think you're right
Sure.
that they can do better than that. I think they should. I think Splatoon deserves a more richly realized campaign world and more interesting levels that are placed in an actual environment. There are a few, but they're relatively few and far between. But when it comes to what this campaign changes from the previous ones, I think that that's where really the quality is a bump up for me.
Yeah, I think because ultimately what this is really is Octo expansion again.
Yeah.
And insofar as, you pay the entry fee, the challenges are very, very short. I mean,
Hmm.
with rare exception, you're in and out in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It's very similar archetypes, but I think that this sort of island of Alterna that you explore
Hmm.
adds a lot as you're getting
Absolutely.
rid of the fuzzy ink and you're going between these islands. I think that does a lot for the game, but frankly, beyond that kind of structure, I don't really know how different my thoughts are on this compared to the other campaigns, which is
Sure.
not again, it's not a judgment on the quality, but simply to
Yeah.
say that I thought all of those are great, and
Yeah.
I think this is
Sure.
great too. But basically for almost the exact same reasons. Although there are particular moments that I want to talk about, especially towards the post game. So,
Yeah.
or sorry, not post game, towards the end of the main game.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that uh, the context that they're placing you in
Yeah,
with Alterna, with this rocket in the middle, making the progression across these islands, and the story moments, which are relatively sparse
yeah.
across
There's
the
few,
campaign,
there's
which
few
is
of them.
which is something that I also definitely wish there was more of because I think that they are the best moments of this
Yeah,
campaign is when characters show up and you know what, spoilers, who cares, the Splatoon campaign. Shiver Fry and Big Man are the what do they call themselves? Well,
deep
they're the
cut.
Anarchy Spotcast, but they're deep cut and they're also like marauders. They're like
Yeah,
the
they're pirate. They're
Pickingtons
like
and
treasure
yeah.
hunters. Yeah.
It doesn't really make
It's
a
funny.
ton of sense, but it's funny, and it's
Yeah.
definitely a subversion of what we come to expect from the idols of Callie, Marie, and Pearl and Marina, who
Yeah.
basically filled similar roles in Splatoon 1 and 2, and also to some degree the Octo expansion. But
I mean, the thing about it is like the idols have always had some sort of alter ego. They've always
yeah,
helped in the campaign with the agents or whatever, but you've never had to fight them. And I thought that,
exactly.
and I think that's sort of the fun inversion. And they have really good boss fights.
Yes.
Um, I will say that I think that honestly, Splatoon 1 and Splatoon 2's campaigns run together in my head.
Yeah.
But I wish there were more bosses for sure,
Yeah.
because I think those sort of sculpted challenges in the past games are really great. Like I remember the fucking guy on the unicycle and all kinds of stuff
hmm
like that. It was really
The
cool.
bread guy.
Yeah, there was awesome bosses, and the ones we have here are really good.
Yeah.
But there's basically four bosses.
There's
What?
there's five because you fight the what DJ Octavio
Yeah,
at the beginning, and then there's the final boss, which is next level, and we'll certainly get to that.
yeah.
But I do agree, and it's I think a little bit of a missed opportunity to not have at least three more bosses on those other alternate islands.
Well, that's what I
Because it's
was
only
expecting.
every
Yeah,
other island that you actually end up fighting a boss, and I feel like they're paced out pretty well in terms of how many challenges you're doing in between
right.
them, but more bosses would honestly just have bumped up the entire thing in terms of creativity, memorable moments, because fighting Big Man with the Mario Sunshine, just one for one
Yeah,
boss ripoff, that was a lot of fun. Shiver Shiver rides around on the big shark that she gives a funny name, and Fry has these eels for whatever the hell reason,
yeah,
but they're definitely a lot of fun.
yeah. They're all really compelling, and I'll talk about the challenge a little bit later. But I think they're some of the only times in the game it's like difficult enough for me,
Sure.
as I'll circle back to. But I do want to shout out the manta ray fight
Mhm.
from Super Mario Sunshine. I mean, people have long said that Splatoon is some sort of inverse on Super
Yes.
Mario Sunshine, and that was mostly always just fan theory.
hmm
In terms of what was actually in the game, obviously Mario was considered to be sort of the star of Splatoon at one point, but
Yeah.
it was really fun because it wasn't spoiled for me. So when the fight started and the ink is the same color and
hmm
you're fighting the same one, I'm like, oh shit, that's awesome. That's the sort of ode that I wish Nintendo did more of. That's not
Hmm.
saying, you know, here's 8-bit Mario again,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
here's Super Mario 64 polygonal costume or something. But a
hmm
little bit of sunshine love, I love to see that. But there's certainly spectacle to all the bosses.
hmm
The Grizzco one in particular is great, but we'll get to that in the end. Um,
Yes, we will.
but on a sort of moment to moment level, I think that while I wanted more bosses, I was never too disappointed in the moment by the number of them, because the pace is very fast.
Yes.
The campaign is probably not more than 4 hours long.
Hmm.
I don't know exactly how long it was. I beat it in ostensibly 2 sittings.
hmm
I did one kind of Mondo sitting, maybe 3 hours, and then maybe put in 90 minutes or so before that. And I think it moves nicely, but I do think it goes back to that point of maybe some more a want of for more environmental variety,
Yeah.
because as you progress across the islands, nothing really changes. I
Yeah.
mean, it's the same shit,
hmm
literally. It's even the theming of the, like, one has ice, one has some like taller like water tower looking things to climb, but for the most part it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to a new area,
Yeah.
but it's the same area with the same sort of challenges. And
Yeah.
I just don't know if necessarily that was the best structure. Like, it might have been more compelling, at least in my opinion, if it was just one big island to
Sure.
explore, like a huge, like, real hub world. I
hmm
think that might have actually been even cooler than, let's get into these transparent loading zone pipes
Yes.
to move around. So I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I think it's not really an issue to me, though I agree that absolutely would have been better,
Yeah,
because the progression through these islands I found to be very, very satisfying, and
yeah,
really what
definitely.
bumped this up in terms of feeling like more of a cohesive and engaging experience rather than just the separated levels that they especially were in the Octo expansion. But clearing that fuzzy goo and being able to make your path forward by chucking your small fry at the goo and having them swallow them up for whatever amount of power eggs it ends up costing,
Yeah,
I thought it was a really interesting way to incentivize exploration. And
definitely.
combining that with the collectibles made me really want to make sure all the goo was gone and go into each level so I had enough power eggs to clear this next area and see if there's a little thing I can shoot at on the ground down there, or find a vinyl record or a
Yeah.
deep sea scroll or something like that. The collectibles and the exploration really go hand in hand and made it feel like I wanted to be in this world rather than just finding the next level. And of course, that was the ultimate goal. But frankly, I found myself enjoying just sneaking around the corners and finding the secrets because there's a lot to find in these they're relatively small islands.
Yeah, I mean they're very dense, and that is definitely what brings this campaign kind of up a step over what came before. Because you're right. One thing when it began, especially because I think that the whole upgrade system with the Sardinium or whatever
Yeah,
is completely superfluous.
it basic yeah.
Yeah,
You can barely feel that things are
no,
changing,
I got
except for
like
like unlocking the bombs or something like that, which
yeah.
does make sense. And I think it. I enjoyed that it was there, but I wish it was more substantial to where you actually felt you were unlocking things.
Yeah, I really, to me, frankly, a superfluous upgrade system is more annoying than a
Mm,
poorly implemented one because it sort of feels like it's there to give the veneer of depth or whatever. It's sort
yeah,
of the same problem I had in part with Lego Star Wars or things
sure.
like God of War or whatever. Because I'm like, this is not the type of game that we're
Mm,
making here. But really, the reason I bring that up even is that I was when I realized that I was concerned that the whole um, salmon eggs to open up later areas to destroy more fuzzy ink would feel equally superfluous. Like the costs are too low compared to what you get, so there's really
no,
never any
it's
reason.
really close.
Yeah, it's really well done to the point where if you want to fully explore an island, you really do need to meticulously
Yeah.
complete the levels, and then you are really well rewarded, whether that is with things for your locker
Hmm.
or the scrolls, more lore bits, any items really. I think that that overworld exploration is a fantastic step forward for the series.
Yeah, and I think that it combines this idea of the fuzzy goo, which leads pretty nicely into what ends up happening at the end. Because
Yeah,
really, ostensibly, that's the only storyline is that
right.
fuzzy goo is everywhere, and you're trying to clear it, and you don't necessarily know why until the very end. But that progression was really addicting to me. And
Yeah.
you say you beat it in 2 sittings. I mean, I almost 100% of this, and it took me 7-8 hours. So it was not a 2 sitting experience for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about it for me is that I 100% of the first island, and that really killed a lot of the momentum for me.
Mm,
Um, because it is definitely it's. I think what I just came to realize is like the clearing everything for me was is more of a post game idea. I wanted a little
sure.
bit more forward progression, and so I said, okay, I'm just going to start moving forward. And so I suppose if you're going for the critical path, it's not that long. If
No,
you want to
it really
find
is not.
yeah, if
And
you want
and
to
I
find
discovered
everything,
that by it depends on how you're balancing your time and how many
right?
stages and how many in which particular goo spots you're clearing.
Yeah.
But you can beeline if you want. And I realized that
Yes.
by pretty much 100%ing the first 4 islands, a little bit of the fifth, and then when I got to the sixth area, I'm like, okay, oh, I got work kind of soon. I just want to see if I can get to the final boss.
Sure.
And I had enough eggs to just not play a single level and go straight to the final boss. And I
Right.
think that balance and the option of, hey, this level isn't working for me, I can leave, I can go somewhere else, I can use power eggs from previous islands to make progress on other ones. It feels like you can really take it at your pace, and the fact that some of the islands can be unlocked in a different order, I thought that worked really well.
Yeah, let me modify what I said a little bit. I think that really the root of why I was getting tired of 100%ing stuff is because I think the levels are too easy. And
Sure.
so I kind of lost interest in beating Island 2 levels to collect more collectibles. 'Cause I'm like, I know I'm going to enter this level, and unless I'm being stupid, I'm never going to die.
Yeah.
And now, of course, I have played a shit ton of Splatoon in my life, but the Octo expansion was way harder than this.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you can make an argument that certain challenges in the Octo expansion were hard in a poorly conceptualized way, and
Yeah.
that is 100% true. But I think that the base level challenge in this game to me is way too low.
Hmm.
Um, in the sense that the challenges fall into archetypes you've seen before. So if you've played Splatoon in the past,
Yeah.
you're not going to really be challenged. I know exactly how to fight an Octo Sniper, and I know that an Octo
Yes.
Sniper is going to take a long fucking time to hone in on me.
Yeah.
And they really introduce, I want to say maybe no new enemy archetypes in this game.
I would not even be able to point one out, and I think that's
Yeah,
definitely a problem. If
right.
making them hairy does not make them a different enemy, it makes
Yeah,
them a little guy riding on a deal, and he's got fuzz on him, and that's very disappointing. Because
right.
you think of this story concept, they say it in the trailer, "Return of the Mammalians," and No, not really. I mean, the enemies you know now have hair on them, but the
Yeah,
fact that they didn't take this opportunity to introduce a whole variety of new enemy types and not make it the Octolings but hairy, I think is a huge missed opportunity. And though was never a problem for me approaching these levels, because
yeah,
I very much disagree with you on the difficulty. I think that this difficulty curve and the pacing of it was leagues better, in my opinion. But not having
right.
different enemies that were the mammalians that changed how you approach the combat is definitely a big missed opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's the sort of thing of like I wanted the game to be harder, but forgoing that, I would want it to at least be different to
Yes.
engage me more because it's a sort of thing of if you've played the past campaigns, most of these levels are very frictionless because you know exactly how to overcome the
Yeah.
obstacle. It's a new level, but nonetheless, it's either a familiar level gimmick or it's an enemy type that you know exactly how to defeat.
Hmm.
So at least if it was like, hey, this is easy, but I have to think a little bit more deliberately about how I'm going to overcome that challenge, it might have spoken to me a little bit more and made me want to beat those earlier areas. But my whole goal is like, okay, look, I just want to get to areas 4 or 5 and 6 where the game might actually be
Yeah.
hard enough for me personally.
Yeah.
And it definitely wasn't, but it was more engaging because I
Sure.
think I think that the levels get a little bit more complicated, a little bit more interesting, and then especially by the time you get into the whole rocket like core
Yes.
building the apparatus and all that, the last 90 minutes of the game I think are excellent. But
They really are.
up until that point, it really did feel like, okay, I love exploring the overworld, but to explore the overworld, I have to go do levels that are very short and
Yeah.
very familiar. And even if they could have done something like like a quote unquote arbitrary difficulty mode,
Hmm.
enemies hit twice as hard, you have half
Sure.
as much health. That would have, I think, engaged me as a player more. Now I do know
Yeah.
that once you complete everything, there's like a final super 3D Mario challenge road
Oh,
esque
sure. Didn't
thing
know
to go
about that,
for,
but cool.
but I don't know if I have the motivation to go play a bunch of simple levels to get to
Yeah.
that personally.
Yeah, I don't think that I will go for that because I definitely had my fill of this
Sure.
campaign in a very satisfying, not derogatory at all way.
Yeah.
And the one thing I would say about this campaign versus the other ones is I do think that the ideas that are exclusive to this, well, even though they are relatively few and far between, and they are not the enemies and they aren't largely the level
Yeah.
archetypes, are some of my favorite that we've seen. It's not the shooting the stupid fucking bowling ball around like it was in Octo expansion.
Yeah.
It's now you have your little buddy the small fry that you can use as a distraction, and that changes up some of the level design. Or
Yeah.
you're throwing it onto a box onto a box that's up there to or onto something to activate it that sort of acts as a different way for you to approach interacting with things you've seen before. And the levels that are based around the new supers I think are excellent. The ones where you're riding around in the tank crab tank
Absolutely.
using the zip caster, those are some of the best levels in this game, and those are the most fun ideas I've played in Splatoon levels. Is
Yeah.
it does feel like there is a little more engaged mechanics that aren't simply focused on this one thing when you have your little buddy that you can throw and use in multiple different scenarios.
Yeah, the small fire ones are cool. Sometimes it's like not quite what I'm looking for when I'm playing Splatoon, to
Yeah.
where like, hey, you're gonna go solve puzzles, and you're kind
Hmm.
of gonna stand back and watch your little dude go to work. But nonetheless, I think they are nice variety. But it is the special base levels that are great. The crab tank, which I find very little utility for in multiplayer.
Yeah.
It's so much fun in the campaign. The
Yeah.
Zipcaster levels are genuinely fantastic,
Yeah.
which leads part of me to being like, well, I wish that there was just a more fleshed out campaign
Yeah.
wherein similar actually to like Halo Infinite, we're gonna make a campaign tailored around the idea that everything you get as equipment in multiplayer is a
Yeah.
sort of persistent upgrade in a single player
Mm.
context. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
you could have made a much bigger Splatoon 3 wherein the Zipcast is just something you unlock akin to the grapple shot.
Hmm.
And you do levels in the crab tank like you're in the scorpion. Now I'm just saying things from Halo that I like, but I think the principle is there of these ideas kind of maybe should they would be a lot more compelling beyond a 2 minute chunk.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I ended up really loving that last 90 minutes of the game so much, because it kind of stitches levels end for end and they feel a little
Yes.
bit grander. And when you're doing the zip caster through like the big chute, like that big cylindrical room,
Hmm.
and you have to get all the like the little power nodes around the fuzzy ink, that was a great level of challenge, and there was a great sense of scope and how big this area was and how
Yeah.
deliberate I had to move through it. And to me, that was really getting to the heart of what I would really love out of the Splatoon 3 campaign, had it been more of just that.
No, absolutely, and I think that that is a almost complete 180 to a lot of the previous levels that you're playing
Yes.
in the way that we were wanting or expressing that we wanted for most of the campaign earlier is they have a great sense of place. You are inside this rocket and the room is shaped like a giant cylinder, and
Yeah.
it's not just a bunch of random things floating around though. They're anchored to things. The enemies are on platforms that at least semi make sense that they
Yeah.
might be inside a giant rocket, and that sense of place and the progression of you making your way up this rocket and then down the thing and then up the ladder and then into the top of the rocket, that is easily the best part of the game. And I think that,
Yeah.
frankly, ending on that high note is what really cements this as my
I agree.
favorite piece of Splatoon single player content. Period, is because it does show that they have the capability to make levels that are grounded in some sort of reality, that feel like very well balanced in terms of their difficulty, and have a really great sense of progression. Is going through this whole last segment is really compelling because as you said, they're sort of stitched end to end, and they're connected in a really interesting way.
Yeah, it's great. As soon as you go from this ridiculous cutting through the fuzzy ink with this random shit you got from Deep Cut
Hmm.
right into this big final sequence, it feels like everything just kind of clicks.
Yeah,
And for all of the reasons you laid out. And then then you get to the big crescendo against Mr. Grizz is his
Mr.
name.
Grizz, yeah, of Grisco fame.
Yes. Very, very clever to use Mr. Grizz in this way, because there was always this feeling in Splatoon 2 and into Splatoon 3 of like, my salmon run boss is a wooden statue of a
Yeah,
bear. But then to actually see that Mr. Grizz is there's a big fucking enormous guy behind that was such a clever bit of world building that kind of loops
yeah.
the entire experience together. Um, and it was just such a fun spectacle
Hmm.
for
No,
sure.
absolutely. Yeah, and there has been the fun spectacles of the final boss battle of DG Octavio in Splatoon 2. And I haven't played Splatoon 1, but I assume that there's a big
Yes,
ending there. And I remember hearing the Calamari incantation while playing that last level of Splatoon 2 and be like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And the end of the Octo expansion as well, covering the Statue of Liberty in ink. Like, these
I
are
love that. Yeah.
great final moments. But I do think that this one ties a little bit better into the lore, as you said. And I do think that the
Yeah.
lore, while it is sparse, that is in Splatoon 3's campaign is the best that we've seen of explaining the history of humanity and what happened
Yes,
and
very cool.
how we came to have a world overrun by aquatic creatures, and that Mr. Grizz is sort of fighting back against this. I think is kind of fun. But as you are on this rocket and he's on the end of it and you're going around it in really interesting ways, and then you get to this final part where DJ Octavio comes up in his ship, and your small fry turns into a huge fry, and you're just doing this giant anime battle in space on the previous big bad ship, and this
Yeah.
gigantic salmon is fighting this gigantic bear in space, and like the universe blows up at the end. It's crazy spectacle, but it's so much fun.
Yeah, it's just impressive. And I think about, and this is kind of weird comparison, but as I was playing it, I was thinking about Mario Golf Super Rush, which is weird. The reason I said that is because there I feel like there are so many Nintendo games that release now with like these sort of bare bones UIs and
Mm-hmm.
narratives and perfunctory single player content. But the fact that Splatoon begins on a cold open and then has a great Nintendo presents
Yeah,
Splatoon 3, and it feels really cinematic, and then it ends similarly to Kirby the Forgotten Land with this incredible high production value, big
yeah,
music, big visuals, interesting, one off but still fun mechanical idea.
yeah.
It's just a sort of attention to detail and love of the craft that I think that is hit or miss this
Sure.
generation.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I really appreciated that. I really appreciate this idea of like, it doesn't just end with a little simple boss fight and then a
mm-hmm.
sort of text box cutscene and we're done.
Yeah,
No, it's balls to the fucking wall. You're on a big spinning Super Mario Galaxy cylinder and Mr. Grizz is throwing shit at you and you gotta use everything. Everybody comes back, and I think that you're a fool for saying you get goosebumps for shit. But I'd be lying, Tucker Hazel, if
oh
I didn't get him when the Calamar incantation
yes,
and here's the thing about me that I think you came to realize a little bit when I was staying with you. I hate when things are loud. I don't like
Sure.
my TV to be loud ever. I want to be able to hear people in the hallway louder than I hear my TV. But
Hmm.
I got up and I cranked that shit as loud as I could because just the audio visual experience
Yeah.
and finishing this fight and seeing the huge fry, I had goosebumps. I thought it was a really spectacular sequence.
Yeah, I was the exact same boat as you. I
Yeah,
fall into that boat significantly more than you do. But I that calamari incantation starts playing, and I'm just bouncing my fucking foot on the ground, and
yeah,
I'm getting this huge grin on my face, and it stays there until the end of the game. And I think that ending on that note really, again, end capped this experience that I again enjoyed across the entire runtime. I really
yeah.
thought this was a fantastic progression up to this. I really enjoyed the exploration, the things that they added in terms of having the hub world and having a little bit more involved story with smaller villains for you to face off with, and the
Yeah.
fact that they become Marie's like employees at the end. Like there's a
It's
little bit
funny.
of a dynamic happening there, and I am excited to see if we do get another single player expansion for Splatoon 3, which I assume that that's
Well, they
happening.
confirmed it, remember, in that direct, and the silhouettes appeared to be Callie and Marie. So
Oh
I imagine we'll be going off with, maybe even with Deep Cut to go do missions for
yeah,
Callie and Marie. So
sure, yeah. Though I will say I am a little bit disappointed that Pearl and Marina didn't show up at all. Having
yeah,
Callie and Marie just again, but they're just like sitting in the environment. It's fine, but like I wish that the what Squidbeak Splatoon like
yeah.
was built out a little more. And that they still had that dynamic. I'd love to see Pearl interact with Big Man and stuff like, it's nerd shit. It doesn't really
It'll
matter.
probably happen. I would
Yeah,
imagine it might happen this expansion, but
yeah. But having all that happen and having the strangest story choice of having, God damn it, having what's his name,
Cuttlefish
Captain Cuttlefish
get dehydrated.
sucked dry, and he's still that way as far as we know.
Yeah, it's
He's just
funny.
a little floating floppy guy. It's just like a story change that makes it feel like there's something actually happening, and of course doesn't really matter. Like we're fucking saving the grape Zatfish again. Like that's a little bit cheap that they're doing that third time. But that one change, I'm like, you did something, and I appreciate that.
Well, yeah, it's interesting bringing that up because, well, first of all, I think it'd be funny if almost in what's his name, Gramps in Xenoblade, how he kind of sits
Yeah.
in Rex's hat for the game. It
Hmm.
would be cool that if Cuttlefish does come back as sort of a persistent little buddy,
Sure,
that'd
that'd be
be
great.
fun. And he sort of rode around with you. But when it started, I was certainly like, oh, are you kidding me? It's the Zapfish
Yeah,
and Octavio again and
yeah,
everything. But I think they nicely play with that expectation.
absolutely.
And then
After two full campaigns of that exact same thing,
yeah,
getting a third one that's like, oh, you thought.
yeah, they do a really nice job with that. Especially then when you beat the game and you're listening to Deep Cut and they're like, who the fuck? What's the Zapfish? Who gives a fuck? It's back. Whatever.
Yeah,
It's kind of funny. I think it plays with your expectation nicely, and I do think yeah, it would have been cool to see Pearl and Marina, but I kind of like this idea that it's sort of a closing of the loop from Splatoon 1 to
sure,
3 with
yeah,
those
yeah,
characters. So I I think I do have a fair number of criticisms about this campaign,
yeah,
but nonetheless, it's sort of because I just think that Splatoon could be more than this.
absolutely.
But for what it is, I had a great time with it,
Hmm.
especially as I got deeper into the game because I do think that by the time you reach Island 5, you reach Island 6, the challenge is heating up a little bit for me, and
Sure.
the level's getting a little bit more engaging, and the presentation is great, and then there's this whole sequence and meta narrative as we're
Hmm.
talking about that's excellent. So yeah, I think that the time of me just looking at Splatoon and saying, "Oh man, look at how creative and wacky this is," might be over because it kind of feels like
Hmm.
they're playing the same hand again and
Sure.
again and again. But it's a really really good hand to play, and so
Yeah.
that's kind of the tension I end up kind of leaving the campaign with. But regardless, I have a smile on my face as it ends, so that's really what matters to me. I think.
Yeah, no, and I'm in the same boat.
Yeah,
I have less criticism than you do, but I think that looking towards the future, I think this is a very good step.
yeah,
It is taking elements from Octo Expansion and placing them into a more like overarchingly designed context. It
yeah,
feels like they it feels higher production value,
definitely.
and setting everything in this world and involving the lore more efficiently, and ending on that big boss battle. I all the changes that they made here do feel like genuine, solid additions that are evolutions of the previous campaigns, and for that I can't thank them enough. But I hope that there's still
Yeah.
more evolution to come. I would love a single player Splatoon game. Just
Right.
release a single player Splatoon game that is in this world, that has a little bit more involved story, more cutscenes, more bosses, but using these mechanics that are so well realized for the multiplayer and placing them in something that engages me a little more and places the context of a world and lore. That this gave me a taste of something that I think can continue to grow,
Yeah.
and I hope it does.
Yeah, I mean, and I hope that that's what this expansion ends up being, because that's largely what Octo Expansion was for Splatoon 2,
Yeah.
because Splatoon 3's campaign is much like Splatoon 3 overall. And I don't know if we'll end up doing like a review of the entirety of the game, but I mean, it's what we've come to know,
Yeah.
but polished to a really fine point,
Hmm.
and that's great. But Octo Expansion was special because largely Splatoon 2 was that to Splatoon 1, this
Yeah.
sort of polishing, and then Octo Expansion was, hey, let's try a different structure, let's try these new ideas, let's try this sole single player experience, right? And I really hope that's what we get. And I do have to say, for me personally, I do still prefer the Octo Expansion.
Yikes.
Splatoon 3's campaign is probably more polished, but what was fun about the Deep Sea Metro is that the Deep Sea Metro did not look like Splatoon 2.
Hmm.
And I'm down in this fucking train, and there's weird goober guys coming all
Yeah.
over the place,
That's
and
part of the Octo expansion.
yeah, and sure, the levels were uneven, but I think that unevenness was because they were trying more.
Yeah.
And not to say that they don't try new things in Splatoon 3's campaign, but I think just as I play more Nintendo games, I would rather have Nintendo games that are maybe objectively worse, but more less risk averse. And for as
Sure.
much as I do love Splatoon 3's campaign and all of my praises ring true, it does feel a little bit risk averse
Sure.
and
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
in some of its in the choices of the levels that it chooses to, the gimmicks it chooses to use and things like that. But they are both excellent, I think, for different reasons.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And hopefully there's an excellent
Yeah.
expansion single player campaign
Next year,
coming
maybe.
within a couple of years. And we'll certainly be talking about that. But thank you, everyone, for watching this, for joining us along this ink covered Splatoony conversation. We've got more to talk about in terms of Splatoon. There's more aspects to this game,
Yeah.
and we might do discussions of those in the future. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys.
We will. That's true. You're not lying.
Yeah.
We'll see them. We hacked their webcams. We see you right now.
Oh, fun fact. This part of my hand
Yeah.
is started to hurt very bad. It's because I've been holding a nunchuck so much.
Really?
Like, just something about the way I like grip the nunchuck and like place my thumb on the joystick.
Huh.
Because I've been playing so much fucking Pikmin.
Don't tell anybody that's how you injured your hand.
Why?
Because that might be the like lamest thing I've heard in my entire life. The Wii, notoriously designed for people who have never touched a video game controller, ages many people in the elderly
Oh, and
demographic.
my wrist started hurting because I was doing so much like small tilting motions to get the fucking pointer control.
That's insane.
I was playing so much Pikmin, I'm injuring myself.
Look, I'll say this at least. When I was playing like Metroid Prime, yeah, at a certain point I'd be playing for a couple hours, my arm would get tired, so I'd have to rest it, against my knee and keep pointing. But
I was never holding up my arm. I always put a pillow. I always lay back and like
Yeah.
just like go like that.
it's just like I'm in a lot of pain today too, but you wanna know why? Because I was squatting a barbell with heavy metal pieces on it. You
We'll
were.
see. We'll see. I've got a debt to pay off.
You were.
Yeah, I was.
Hey, but you're doing it for Pikmin, so I
I'm doing
can
it for good
accept
cause,
it.
yeah.
I can accept it.
Yeah.